may be seated. So it's Shabbat Zakhor, and we just read the maftir for Amalek. You didn't miss it. It's impossible, I think, to have a haftarah like this today and not talk about it, so I am. Today's haftarah from 1 Samuel chapter 15 is the third in the line of 4 biblical steps of the Amalek saga. Amalek, the concretization of evil on earth, is defined in Exodus as the tribe who attacks the Israelites fleeing their taskmasters, and the tribe that delights in preying on the most vulnerable of the Israelite refugees. In this case, the stragglers, presumably the old, the disabled, women, and children. In today's maftir from Devarim, the second step contains the command to wipe out this tribe, or perhaps the evil that they embody, the victimization of the unprotected refugee, non-citizen, disabled, elderly, homeless women and children from the earth. The third step is today's haftarah, which records the story of the prophet Shmuel's demand that King Shaul carry out this ruling, and Shaul's subsequent failure to fulfill this ruling in full. And the fourth, the climax, is the story in the book of Esther, where Mordechai, the descendant of the tribe of Binyamin, Shaul's tribe, acts as Shaul's surrogate to finish Shaul's incomplete action, leaving us stunned and disoriented by Esther's gory conclusion this coming Thursday evening. What is usually a Shabbat that invokes theological discussion is, since October 7th, a Shabbat that invokes the opposite of theological discussion, rather a discussion of what it is life as beings basar v'dam, of flesh and blood, in a world of flesh and blood, where the most unimaginable of horrors is perpetrated on the most vulnerable of our people, including babies. And much of our world and even local population makes excuses, moral equivalencies, and even celebration. I don't know any other word for it but pure evil, the Amalek spirit, than to watch Eli Sharabi give himself up on October 7th and 23 in exchange for the lives of his wife and daughters from their bomb shelter. And after some 500 days in the tunnels of Gaza, his tormentors continually egging him on in optimism to see the wife and daughters he exchanged himself for, only to learn upon his recent release that they had been killed all along, and they had tormented him for sport. The rabbinic view that Amalek is a spirit that can reappear in our world is no longer a theological speculation for me. And after October 7th, it is a certainty. And this causes me to consider today's haftarah in a different light than in the past. What can be our response in the face of such evil? Should the end of the Megillah, in which the Amalekites are massacred, Hamanites as the descendants of the Amalekites, be celebrated? Does today's disturbing haftarah, sanctioning the worst of return force and massacre, have any redeemable or instructive message, while we can still maintain some humanity and see humanity in others? And so I share 3 brief points on which I find some light. First, the rabbinic position is that the present nations are not the Amalekite nation of old. It's the spirit of Amalek that can arise, not an entire tribe or nation, but the spirit within individuals. And this leads me to distinguish between Hamas and the Palestinian people. They ought not to be confused, even when the differentiations are challenging. The challenge is no excuse. There's no excuse in this context to confuse evil and an entire people. 2, God does not order the massacre at the end of the book of Esther. God, after all, does not appear in the Megillat Esther at all. It's King Ahasuerus who creates the circumstances for the massacre by refusing Esther's plea. Esther's plea is to rescind the decree for the deaths of Jews. He refuses, only issuing an additional decree that Jews may preemptively defend themselves. It was not ordered by God. And third, the haftarah has a very different message when it is put in the larger context of its preceding chapters. When done that way, it contains a warning that is missing from taking it in its isolation that you're about to hear. And that warning is profound and relevant for today. The previous chapters of 1 Shmuel are extremely complicated, but they are a saga about about the role of the military and of the king. The people beg for a king because they cannot defeat the Philistines and the Ammonites and the others around them. And so they beg for a king, and the king, Shaul, is appointed by a seer under the understanding that he will be able to muster an army. But what happens in between is that he is unable to control that army. And the stories of the previous chapters are the fact of whether he has control or he does not. And the unpleasant and objectionable massacre we have in today's haftarah is part of God's instruction that the military be restricted from having any benefit from the defeat of Amalek. They may not gather property. There may be no material benefit from this war. In its context, it's about controlling human power and ulterior motive. So that is instructive to me today, because while I am profoundly supportive of the war against Hamas, and I am not apologetic for the steps that are taken therein, I allow this haftarah and the Jewish tradition to caution us about whether there are ulterior motives among the leaders who are involved in prosecuting our defense and our offense, maybe for land or material gain. And that is a word that